everybody, welcome back to the Claremont Classic Garage. Today is a sad day around here. It's a day when we say goodbye to an old friend. It's not what you're thinking. The old friend we're going to say goodbye to lives under the hood of this car. Its brains all came out on Saturday night. I don't know what happened to it, but it's bad. It went kaboom and there was oil all over the place and the car filled with smoke and yeah, I think the whole bottom end of this thing is scattered. We're just hoping, we got our fingers crossed that it didn't smash up the cylinder head, but you know, I'm not holding my breath on that one. Anyway, in this video, what we're gonna do is get this engine out. We'll take it apart and see what the heck happened to it. We may even have to take some of it apart to get it out because right now it doesn't turn, and I need to be able to turn it at least one full revolution to get the bolts out of the torque converter. Anyway, one thing at a time, and then what we're going to do is, after we've gotten this one taken apart and kind of diagnosed, if there's enough left to diagnose, I've got some very old footage I found in my camera of another engine that that didn't end up so well off, and I've got another one that was in this car about 12 years ago that I've never taken apart to see what went wrong with. So we'll take that one apart too. Anyway, let's get started. So, I guess this is not what I figured I'd be doing this week. It's convertible night at cruise night this week, and I was all pumped up. I got some parts and stuff. We were going to get the convertible over here in the shop and do some work on it and get it ready back on the road for the first time in I don't know how many years and take it to convertible night. Anyway, this is my convertible now. We've converted a perfectly good engine into a pile of scrap. That's what we converted. Anyway, everything was fine. We went there, it blew up in practice. We went out, I maybe ran 4 or 5 laps of practice, and we've been working on the chassis on this thing. We've been sneaking back up on a good setup. And every week it's a little bit better. And we went out there Saturday for practice, and this car was flying. It was fast, man. I was so happy with it. And I made it 5 laps. Coming off the 4th turn, kaboom. No warning, no nothing. Sometimes they'll spin a rod bearing or spin a main, and you can feel the engine starting to get tight. You see it'll start getting hot and losing a bit of oil pressure and starts losing power, and you know it's getting tight and you better get off the track. This thing, no warning, nothing. 1 second it was at 6,500 RPM, the next second it was at 0. So my best bet is that it broke a connecting rod. It'll happen to these Neon engines when you run them at high RPM for a long time. It's just a matter of time. You got to remember, these things, they've already been on the road for 300,000 kilometers, and then us yahoos put them in these little cars and start whining their little brains out at $7 grand every Saturday night. Well, you know, sooner or later it's going to come apart. So anyway, we had a look, and what do you know? You can see right down there, there's a nice little hole in the block, and that sticking out is the small end of number 3 connecting rod. So I guess the big end is still in there somewhere, and I'm not quite sure where the piston is, but it's not on the rod anymore. So we'll get this thing out of here and give it an autopsy. Well, you can see here we've got a window in the front side of it too. I'm going to grab a flashlight and see what I can see in there. Well, the big end of the rod seems to still be on the crankshaft, I think. Now we'll find out when we get it out. So the first clue as to what's going on here, I wanted to get the timing cover off and bring it around and make sure the timing marks all line up, which they do. So we know that this episode didn't originate with the timing jumping and it smashing the valves or something. I'm pretty certain that it was just a failure of a connecting rod. All the external stuff is stripped off of it. Now we're going to start having a look inside it. First thing, we're going to get the plugs out of it. So we've started taking the spark plugs out. We've got 1, 2, and 4 out. Now I've saved number 3 for last because if this thing comes out like really tight all the way, oh yeah, the head is destroyed. you can tell by how this thing is coming out that the head probably didn't have a happy ending. Oh, well, it's not that bad. We'll see when we see the end of it. That would be very sad because this is a good head. That's not good. Now I'll get the valve cover and the rockers off and see if we've got any valves falling down. So you can see here this valve, the head is gone. That's not usually good. The other three seem like they're still in there. So obviously we've got some damage. Now I gotta take these bolts off and we'll get the head off. All right, we'll take the head off, put it over here. Let's look down the hole. Oh yes. Number 3 cylinder has left the building. Well, so much for that head. All right, well, let's see what's in here. Yee. Well, we found the piston. There you can see the big end of the rod. And thankfully, the rod bolts are still there, which, you know, you don't like to see. Oh, there's the piston. That's the scrapers for the oil ring. Wow. I wonder if we'll ever find the head of the valve. It's in here somewhere. Okay, so you can see the big end of the rod is still on the crank. We found the small end of the rod and the wrist pin, but the beam is gone. It probably got ejected and ended up on the racetrack somewhere. I hope it didn't hit anybody's car. All right, so we got this one. Huh, look at that. The bearing's even okay in it. You can see here there's nothing wrong with the mains. They're a little gouged up because there was probably all kinds of shrapnel flying through here. But for the most part, it's okay. The block, unfortunately, is junk. The bed plate goes with it because they're machined as a whole thing. Even our oil pan got a hole in it. So there's not really a whole ton of stuff we could save from this engine, unfortunately. This stuff, the camshaft, the valve gear, that sort of stuff is okay. But that's about it. I think we'll be starting from scratch with this one. Anyway, at least it's apart and we know what happened. The connecting rod broke. It's a neon thing. And problems are usually in number 3, or I've had number 4 problems too. 1 and 2 are pretty good in them, but these two at the back, I mean, they're the furthest away from the oil pump, so if stuff's going to go wrong, it usually goes wrong back here. When I've spun bearings, it's always number 3 or number 4. Anyway, that's a wrap for this one. The next footage I'm going to show you is from, holy moly, 3 or 4 years ago. It was an engine that we hurt at, I think it was when we went to the big track, Jukasa Speedway, and we hurt the engine there. I think this footage is of that engine. I'll be back when it's done. And then we're going to take apart an old 8-valver. Okay, here we have our little 2-liter neon engine that we managed to kill at the 50 lapper at Jukasa Speedway early in the summer. Today's project is we're going to finally get around to taking this little thing apart and seeing what exactly went wrong. I'm pretty sure I know what's wrong with it, but we'll see when we get into it. Alrighty, first things first, I wound it around to get number 1 at top dead center and make sure all the timing marks line up. So we're good there. Okay, I've gone ahead and taken off the valve cover and got all the valve gear out of the way, and everything looks okay up in here. It's nice and clean, there's no junk. The camshaft turns nice and easy, so I don't think we got any trouble up in the head. Pretty sure the problem's down below. I'll go ahead and pull the head off and we'll see what we see down the holes. Well, here's the first sign of trouble. You see number 1 is sitting at top dead center like it should. Oh, look at number 4. Uh-oh! It's down about 125 or, well, probably more, thou. So we've got a severely wiped out connecting rod on number 4. Let me spin it around and see what happens when 2 and 3 come up. So we can see here that 2 and 3 are okay. Just seems to be old number 4. Turn it around again. Bring them back up. There, you can see it. That's bad. Well, there you have it. Number 4. Smoked the journal, smoked the rod. Everything's junk here. Now, we'll get that last thing out. Then I'm going to pull the bed plate off. And keep my fingers crossed. Hopefully it didn't spin any of the mains. At least then we can reuse the block. So long as the bore in number 4 isn't all scored up. We'll find out. Well, isn't that cute? So there's the rod and piston from number 4. Strangely, the piston's not really scuffed at all. So I think we'll be able to reuse the block. But boy, that rod sure took a beating. That's how much she was tightening up. I could feel it. And it bent it, just trying to turn it around. That's really something. So the bed plate is off. You can see the mains all look good. Thank goodness. So it didn't spin any of the mains. The back two on either side of the rod that was smoking hot took a little bit of heat, but they never spun. So theoretically we should be able to reuse this block. What I will do before I actually reuse it, I'll put it all back together, torque everything down, and measure everything to make sure that she's good to use. Once I get the crankshaft out, we'll have a look at the bores. There's what's left of the rod bearing in number 4. Not too pretty, is it? Here's the last one we're going to take apart today. This is an old Chrysler 2.5 8-valve engine, like was used in K cars and LeBarons and earlier stuff like that. This is the original version of the 2.5, which is what we call the tall 2.5. Back in the day when these first came out, the 2.2 and the 2.5 had different deck heights. And I kind of think that there is about 1/4 of an inch is the difference. I may be wrong, but it's been a long time since I messed with these things. So then later they came up with what they called the common block, where they used the same block for 2.2 and 2.5. They just changed the crankshaft and rods and pistons and stuff to make it work. But this is the original tall 2.5. I think it was only offered, I think, 86, 87, and maybe 88. The common block for sure was in play in 89. This one is a 1986 engine. I pulled it out of an 86 K car. So what the story is on this, back in the day when I started racing mini stocks, a lot of the cars were still 8-valve, but the 16-valve revolution had begun. And the difference in power was just unbelievable. Pretty much overnight, all the old 8-valve cars became obsolete. So what the tracks did to try and help keep us competitive was they opened up the rules. The 16-valve cars had to be dead nut stock under the hood, but the old 8-valve cars, they basically just removed all the engine rules. You could kind of do whatever you had to do to try and keep up. So over time, that's what we did with this engine. One trick that you learn, that I learned anyway, is messing around with pistons. And in the tall 2.5 only, if you put early 2.2 pistons in it, because of the difference in pin height, it pushes them up in the chamber, and you end up with what I believe, I think if memory serves me again, you end up with somewhere in between 10.5 and 11-to-1 compression. And that helps a lot. I mean, it's air quotes here, racing engine. So what else we used to do with these, and you'll see when we get in there, is muck around inside the head. So this has got the biggest camshaft, off the shelf. It's a comp Magnum. I think it's 274 duration and 460 lift. I can't remember what the center line is on it. Or it says 105 there, but that's a pretty small lobe separation angle. But anyway, maybe that's it. I can't remember. Or maybe that's what I set it at. And then we did other stuff to these engines. We would put PT Cruiser lifters in them because the original K-car lifters weren't really made for continuous high RPM use, and they would get aerated, and you'd lose all your valve lift at high RPM. So the PT Cruiser lifters had a little bleed hole in the top, so we put those in. And there was another modification where you use beehive valve springs from I think a Chevy LS engine. We did that. I don't know if it helps or not, but it looks really impressive when you open it up. We also, in those days, even for us 8-valve guys, there was no header allowed. So what we did here, the actual exhaust manifold for this engine was a terrible, horrible piece of garbage. It only had a 1 7/8 collector in here. So what we did, we sawed that off. We sawed this manifold off right about there and welded on the collector from a neon exhaust manifold, which is 2 1/4. Helped a lot. We also modified our single point fuel injection, or TBI, I guess you could call it. We modified the TBI intake manifold and made an adapter plate, and we've got a 350 Rochester 2-barrel off a Chevy V8, like a 305 or something. You could probably get these on the small Buick V6s too. And that's what we did to try and keep up. But in the end, it just wasn't enough. The very last time we raced this engine was at the Big Fall 50 Lapper at Peterborough Speedway. And we were literally out of, I think they started 28 cars. We started 28th. And we actually qualified 29th, but somebody couldn't make the show. We were the bubble car, and we squeaked in. And that's how bad this engine was. And then we went back the very next year with a stock neon engine in it and put that car in the second row. That's the difference that the 16-valve engine makes. Anyway, this engine did finally meet its demise. We went down to Flamborough Speedway with it, and in qualifying, it's the strangest thing I've ever seen. The needle and seat actually started unscrewing. I guess it was loose or whatever, and it started unscrewing, and as it unscrewed, it just kept lowering, pushing the float further and further into the bottom of the carburetor until it went lean and, well, melted something. I guess it melted a piston because of the look at the blow-by that was coming out of it. It left a trail of smoke all the way around the track. So anyway, we're going to take this thing apart today and see what the heck actually went wrong with it. Let's get started. First thing I did was roll the engine around until all our timing marks line up, so it's at top dead center on number 1. Another interesting thing to point out is the ignition on this. The original ignition was Hall effect, and the advance was controlled by the computer. Well, once we got rid of the fuel injection, I did for a while leave the computer hooked up running just the ignition, but it's hard to tell where it's at, what it's doing. So I decided I wanted a proper mechanical advance distributor that I could manipulate. And in order to do that, trying to find the early Omni stuff, I think it was only 1 or 2 years. It's still Hall effect, but it actually has a mechanical advance built into it. That was problematic, and it was going to be expensive. So all we did was we got a Pinto. This is a Duraspark distributor from a 2-liter Pinto. And lucky I knew a fellow that had a lathe long before I had a lathe. And we modified the Pinto distributor to fit in the Chrysler engine. And then I was able to, it's a magnetic pickup, not Hall effect. And I was able to use just a normal Chrysler ignition box to run it. And that worked out pretty well. Also noteworthy, if you're mucking around with these old Chrysler 8-valve engines and you end up using a radiator that doesn't have a rad cap on it, first and second generation single cam neon thermostat housings go right on and gives you a place to put your rad cap. Let's see what's in here. There we are. Let's have a look at our camshaft. See that? Beautiful. No wear on it. All good. All the oil has run back down in it over the years. I can't even remember which cylinder it was that's roached. I think too, these are the old direct connection heavy duty followers that we used to get. Like I said, I can't really remember. It was a long time ago. This engine came out of this car, I guess, about, I don't know, 9 or 10 years ago. It's been sitting around a long time. So anyway, I'm going to get these bolts out and we'll pull the head off and see what carnage is in there. So the head is off. Everything looks pretty normal in there. You can see, oh boy, high performance. We got the E3 spark plugs in here. Pretty decent sized valves, really, for a tiny little engine. You couldn't fit much bigger ones in there, could you? There's the 16 valve head that replaced this. And you'll notice the bolt pattern is the same, which makes possible a pretty healthy swap that guys like to do is put the neon head on the old school K-car short block, because the bottom end of the K-car engine is so much tougher than the bottom end of the neon engine. Now that's very interesting. When I took the head off this thing, I was really expecting to find a piston with a big hole in it. Or at least, you know, one of the side kind of burned away. But there's nothing, because this thing it had blow-by so bad, it was shooting oil right out the breather. And one cylinder, I just can't remember back then, had zero compression. So we're going to have to go a little deeper. We might have to actually take the pistons out to see if we can find some damage. So we'll go ahead and get the rest of this stuff out of the way. We'll flip it over, get the oil pan off, and start pushing the pistons out and see what we find. I've got the distributor out, and you can see here how we modified the bottom end of it so it would work in the K-car engine. And you can see here how we had to just give a little clearance on the cap so it would fit. But that's all we really had to do with it, and it fit perfect. And this thing worked great. Never had any ignition trouble at all with this setup. I had this thing hooked up to a Mopar orange box, and it worked perfectly. Got the oil pan off. You can see in here the baffling that we made for it. Well, it's broken there. Guess I didn't do a very good job welding it. Well, here's the first sign of trouble. This is number 2, and you can see a broken ring. Like really broken. It's all busted into little pieces. You can see here number 3. This is what was giving us all our blow-by. The top compression ring is absolutely destroyed. I also found when I was taking it apart that the rod bearings have lost all their crush. So I guess this thing had maybe some nasty detonation going on. It happened so fast. I mean, it went good 1 second and was, well, not going so good the next second. Anyway, that's how fast these things happen. Anyway, that was pretty fun. I've been wondering for many years what actually happened to that old 2.5, and, well, now we know. I kind of thought I'd find a piston with a big hole in it, but we found a bunch of messed up rings, which will give you the same kind of effect, really, in the end. Anyway, that'll do it for this one. I got to clean up now and get to work on some other stuff. I want to thank you for tuning in. I hope you'll come back and see us again soon on the Claremont Classic Garage. And until then, this is Kevin checking out. So long for now.